Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We are excited to have you on. My name is Erica and I work on the content team here at GitLab, and I'm joining you from Chicago today. We'd love to hear where everyone is tuning in from, so if you feel so inclined, please use the chat function to tell us where you are in the world. Also joining us this morning is Lee Matos, a support engineering manager at GitLab, who will be on hand in just a bit to do some technical tag teaming with our presenters, John Jeremiah, our product marketing manager, and technical product marketing manager, Dan Gordon. We're going to give people a few minutes to get going and logged on. So while we're doing that, I'm going to launch a poll for you to take part in if you'd like. During today's webcast, we will be going over our latest release, 11.0, and we'll focus primarily on the Auto DevOps aspect of the release. So here we go with the poll. Fantastic. So while we're doing that, I will go over a few bits of housekeeping items. First, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can ask them during, as we're talking here, with the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will also have dedicated time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation and demo, but feel free to get them in line or in queue if you feel the need to do so, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end of the presentation. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, you can use the chat function to get in touch with the moderator for help. So thanks again for participating in the poll. And now I'm going to turn it over to John and Dan.
Erica, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be with you today to talk about 11.0 and Auto DevOps and how we're helping teams everywhere to accelerate and go faster. Dan, could you go to the next slide just as we go through this? I want just to level set and remember GitLab, who we are and what we're focusing on. We're focusing on the entire DevOps lifecycle, everything from planning all the way through releasing and monitoring, ensuring that people can manage and secure and operate their applications. And so we're trying to embrace the entire life cycle. And we're really doing this because we understand the changes that are all around us that are happening faster and faster. We can go next slide, Dan. The businesses more and more are software. Businesses are managed and run by software. Competition is defined in software. You know, the Marc Andreessen quote about software is eating the world is so true today. You see it everywhere. Disruption happens in the form of new innovation that happens on mobile applications as we walk and we interact with each other. You know, when companies have disruptions or problems in service, it becomes, you know, huge conversations that everyone talks about. Software is incredibly important, and the speed at shipping software is what's incredibly important because that allows people to innovate and to deliver value faster than ever. And go to the next slide, Dan. And what the thing is, as we've been doing this, people have been trying to invest and work on DevOps and work on ways of transforming to go faster. They've put, you know, significant resources into doing it. But, you know, the reality is a lot of times people have been, you know, underwhelmed and unhappy with the results they're getting. They're still struggling to get the full value of DevOps and what the promise and the potential is there. And, you know, one of the reasons that we think is part of this is it's really difficult to build and manage and to create the tool chains needed in order to deliver and to make sure we're able to go as fast as we need to go. And we've been trying to help solve this problem, and we're working on that. And 11.0 is directly related to that. And the next slide really shows how we're doing this and the highlights of what we're doing with 11.0. And so to summarize, I want to just touch on a couple of high points. You know, security. Security is an unbelievably important part of doing DevOps. I mean, there's the idea of DevSecOps. Let's make sure we include security in it. I tend to think security is inherently part of it because it's part of how you deliver software. And we've been introducing new capabilities to make it easier to see the vulnerabilities from SAST scans. And we've introduced additional languages, .NET and Scala. Kubernetes. We've increased and improved our integration of Kubernetes in order to see data and to see in GitLab the status and the health of your pods and your clusters as they're running. We've been working to continue to improve planning and portfolio management. And I love this update because it illustrates how we embrace the smallest viable change. We call it minimum viable change as a way to ship and deliver new capabilities. In this case, the screenshot shows how we've introduced a new time scale to zoom in and zoom out of the view in epochs. We can go to the next slide because I think we double click into license management. Next slide, Dan. License management was a feature we added as well of a whole capability around understanding and tracking the different open source components and open source licenses that are included in your application. So that way you know what components have been added and how they're licensed. Next slide. And as we keep going, the web IDE is a way for you to edit multiple files and to make commits quickly and to track and manage things. And we've enhanced the web IDE now to where you have pipeline status and you're able to manage the pipeline and what's happening in your pipeline as it runs without leaving the IDE to make you more efficient and more effective. And the one thing I haven't thought of and I hadn't covered yet, and it's one more thing I think to talk about. Next slide, Dan. It's Auto DevOps. Play the video, Dan.
Introducing 3 easy steps to done. Step 1, write your code. Step 2, push your code. Step 3, wait a minute, there is no step 3. Auto DevOps just detected your language, built your app, tested it, ran security tests, packaged, deployed, and is monitoring your app. You're done. Auto DevOps from GitLab. 2 steps to done.
Okay, let's go to the next slide and we talk a little bit more about, so I can talk a little bit more about Auto DevOps. And this is our 84th consecutive release of delivering, 84th consecutive monthly release, delivering new capabilities and features to GitLab. And when we launched 10.0 about 8 months ago, we introduced the idea of of automating the pipeline. We called it Auto DevOps, and we continued to iterate. It was a beta. It was a beta release then. We said, this is an idea we're going to grow and groom and improve over time. And that's exactly what we've done, incrementally release after release. And today, Auto DevOps is GA. We believe that these 12 capabilities are there to help you go from committing your code all the way to production with almost no steps. And I would love to see other people do their 2 steps to done videos. If you have your creative ideas, we've shared a couple of ours. But the ability to do this is incredibly exciting because it helps teams to focus on solving business problems and to spend less of their time and energy building, maintaining, and managing a pipeline. The pipeline is incredibly important, and that's why we've built it and made it as easy as we can for you to take advantage and get the value from it. Now, I think it's better. It's better to see it, and it's better to see how it all works than it is to hear me talk about it. And so, Dan, I'm going to turn the floor to you and let you take over and share and show everyone how Auto DevOps works.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Okay, great. So just while we're on this slide, I just wanted to point out, Auto DevOps works great with our very tight integration with Kubernetes and Prometheus for monitoring, which are all part of GitLab in 11.0. All of these functionalities on the right side are also integrated technologies from open source technologies and that we've built ourselves and put together into a single application that does all of this. And what Auto DevOps does is it takes all of this and strings it together so that you can get all of these pieces working together with minimal configuration. And we think that this is the best way to bring all of these best practices to everybody involved in delivering software. So with that, I will switch over to live view. I'll pull it down a little bit. So what we're looking at right now is a 11.0 release server. This is actually GitLab.com, so you too can be on this server. And I've created an application that is just a blank app, or project rather, which is going to become an application, a Spring app, just a very simple application for our demo purposes. There is some configuration that was done ahead of time here, which is part of just getting set up so that you can go fast. That includes setting up the Kubernetes cluster, which I won't go into the detail of here today. That also includes enabling Auto DevOps. Now, Auto DevOps can be enabled server-wide. That is up to you if you're administering it. Otherwise, it can be turned on on a project level basis. So this system, as you see, has Auto DevOps enabled already and Kubernetes configured already. Now, looking at the project, you see that this is an empty project. There's nothing here right now. So there's no repository. It's just set up and ready to go. So when that happens, GitLab gives you a few pointers, a few pieces of text that'll help you get going if you already have something. So this is our step one, so to say. So I already have some code. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this so that we can pull that up into the repository. And we will switch over to the terminal. So this is my code, very simple application, just a Java Spring hello world. I'm going to go ahead and paste in that code, or the command lines rather. And that should push the code up to here. So now going to our repository and looking at our files, there they are. Now you'll notice this is, as I said, simple. There is no Docker file. There's no CI/CD configuration of any sort, just XML, JSON, and some source code. Let's go ahead and pop into the source code and make a small change. Let's say hello world controller. Now with GitLab, for those of you that use it, you already know. For those of you that don't, you can edit files in place in the web browser. I can simply say edit. But we've also got this brand new spanking really cool web IDE that John was talking about. It was released before 11.0, but we're continuing to enhance it. In this web IDE, I can work on multiple files as you'd expect. I'm just going to simply edit this file. So we've got a to-do line here. I'm going to go ahead and take that out because we're going to make the change. It says personalize it. So let's say hello from GitLab. Give ourselves a few exclamation points because we're super excited here. I'm going to commit those changes. Right away, the web IDE gives me the diff so I can see what I've changed. Very nice and handy. I'm going to stage my changes that I want to commit. Add a simple commit message. And here I have some options. I could push it to master branch. That's not really the flow that we like to follow. I can create a new branch and push this to that, or commit this to that. Or I can create a new branch and put in a merge request so that we can start working on it. People can have a conversation about it. We can track all of the activity around it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. It auto generates a branch name for me, and I'll go ahead and commit. So step one, I've put some code and I've made a change. This is my merge request. I'll go ahead and assign it to myself. We see I'm pushing or merging this branch with master. I'm going to go ahead and select remove source branch when merge is accepted so that we can kind of keep our repository clean because once it's merged, I don't need it. And then I will submit. Now here's where the exciting part happens because here is where Auto DevOps is kicking in. You see now there's already a pipeline that's running here. Okay, I didn't do anything, didn't configure any pipeline. Let's go take a look at that pipeline. So This is all part of Auto DevOps. And we're going to spend a minute here talking about all these pieces. The build is the first thing it's going to do, of course. We'll go pop into that. And while that's running, so what this is doing is this is taking Heroku build packs, and it's using those to figure out what is the code that I'm trying to build. It's building that code, and then it's building an appropriate Docker image for that code. If I had a Docker file in my repository, then Auto DevOps would pick that up and use that instead, but it's using the default one since I don't have a Docker file. So that's going to go do its thing. We'll pop back to the pipeline. For a little minute here, we'll talk about the test area. So there was a big list of things that John talked about and that we had listed there around what Auto DevOps is doing, all those functionalities. So here's where a lot of that comes into play. In parallel, once the build is complete, Auto DevOps will pick up and the pipeline will do code quality checks. So it'll do static analysis. It will do a container scan because we want to make sure that the application environment that we're putting our application into is also clean of vulnerabilities. The pipeline will also do dependency scanning to look at all of the dependent libraries and things that our software is pointing to and make sure that those are also not vulnerable, or if they are, it will flag those so we're aware. The new piece, license management, is also in there. It's going to look at those dependencies and make sure that there's no licenses that are new that we're not aware of. And if they are, that they match our policy about what we're okay with. So we can look at those and say, well, I don't really want that viral OSS license as part of my software. It's going to also do static application security testing to make sure that we don't have vulnerabilities in our code. And then the build pack will look at the tests that it understands for the language and run those as well. Once all of these are complete, it will move on to creating the review app. Now, I'm going to actually do the baking show thing here because this build will take probably longer than we want to sit and watch it. So I actually have my cake in the oven right here. This is basically the same app. It's a Spring app. It's just one that I did earlier. It has a pipeline similar to the one that we were just looking at, except this one finished a while ago. So as it runs, it collects all the information so you can get access to all of the details, but it also creates a report and attaches it to the MR as an artifact that you can get and look at. The review app, in this stage, Auto DevOps is looking at the application and the Docker container that the instance it was put in. And it's looking at the Helm charts that are default part of Auto DevOps and figuring out how to deploy this into an environment so that we can have a live application that we can get to on the network and actually look at, so all of our stakeholders can see the changes live on a system that is an ephemeral system, which we will eventually throw out. This happens for every time that our DevOps pipeline runs. And this is incredibly useful because it allows you to see for real, in real life with your eyes, the working application before it gets into production. If you have your own Helm chart in your repository, then Auto DevOps will pick that up and use that to deploy your application in the way that you would like. So at this point, we have a live application running. And that means that we can do further work like dynamic application security testing, which Auto DevOps, the pipeline, then goes on to do. This also means we can do some performance checking. So we use site speed IO to check browser speed response times. Okay. But to really see the beauty of all of this pipeline running, let's go back to the merge request. So this, like the previous one, is the merge request that kicked off the pipeline and got everything rolling. Now you notice there's a line here that got added that says the result of this merge request was deployed to this environment. And by the way, here it is. So I can open that up and I can see my changes. And if this was a full app, I could go dig into it and interact with it. This is just a static web page. It's also been kind of watching it and doing some checks on the memory because it's sitting on our server and we have access to it, to all of that. So we can get a sense for how the server is behaving with, or really how the app is behaving on the server with the new code changes. So we had a spike when we first set it up. We have information about throughput and all of this, and also on the Kubernetes cluster itself. So that's useful stuff, but let's keep going, right? All of those tests that ran, right? The output has to be somewhere. Well, we think the best place is right here in the merge request so that you can, the stakeholders, whoever's deciding on whether to actually merge, can look at all of this and make a decision. Remember, I removed that to-do comment. So code quality picked that up and liked that. So I got a point for that. And it tells me, hey, good job. Got the to-do out of there. Got that fixed. If it was negative code quality, it would also put that in there and I would understand more closely what the issue was. The performance metrics degraded. That's sad. Only by a point though. So I'm going to say we're okay there. Security scanning. In this case, it actually found a vulnerability. Darn it. So we can look at that and we can get more detail. So SAFT found this problem. And actually looks like DAFT found a vulnerability as well. So I can pop that open. I can go get more information about it. There's a summary, but then there's also links to the source information. I can actually go look and have GitLab show me where in my files did it find a problem. So I have context to where the issue is. I can make a decision to dismiss this vulnerability for this project. So this is like whitelisting it. Or I can create an issue from right here, which will fill in the details and then become a task that we need to work on. I'm going to go ahead and just ignore that for now. And this will be similar. And then here's license management. It said, hey, I looked and I did not detect any new licenses that you need to be concerned about. So fantastic. So this looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and merge it. So that's going to go ahead and kick off a new pipeline. And this pipeline looks a little bit different. Similar, but different, because you'll notice now it's not going to a review app. It's going to production. So this is Auto DevOps and continuous deployment at its best. I can have my checkpoint and then send it through to production, and it will go ahead and studiously do that for us. Now, let's go take a look at the environments under operations, since we did deploy earlier on this particular server. So I can see I have one instance right now. And I can go and look at that live as well. This is, again, a different server before the deployment, because I just merged, right? I can also get to the monitoring information from here. Including the Kubernetes cluster. And you can also put custom monitoring in here as well to look at other things that you're interested in watching. So a few last pieces. let's say you're looking at this and you're saying, this sounds pretty good, but I'm not ready to push straight to production yet. I want to have my hand in there. And that's not a problem. We got you covered. So if you go under settings and CI/CD, one of the configurations for Auto DevOps is to say, automatically do everything up to staging, but then stop and let me make a manual decision into production. So that's an easy change to make. I'm going to go ahead and just kick off another pipeline so we can see the difference. I'm not worried about that one that's running. I'm going to go to master so that it will go to production. And so now you see similar pipeline, goes to staging automatically, but then for production, we actually have an incremental rollout where I will need to select what I want to do here. There's also the ability to go in and customize the Auto DevOps script directly, where you can enable, for example, canary deployments and alter other parts of it and use that as your template, your framework to make your own pipelines. And that is, in quick summation, Auto DevOps.
Wow, Dan, that's cool. Every time I watch this demo, every time we go through this, and every time I tell someone about it, their reaction is, that sounds like magic. So I love watching you show how it works and how it's not, and how real it is. Let's see what kind of questions we have from the audience. We have time for Q&A. We had a question. I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any questions in the Q&A panel, but we have a question in the chat. Let's see. We had a question about what's the third icon, GitLab, Kubernetes, or what? That was Prometheus. So we leverage Prometheus for monitoring, and we've got that. And then I see, let's see. There is a question that if you do dev work in a Linux environment / Windows environment, our job should be able to do whatever compiling you need. That was the answer. Marcus's question. Where was Marcus's question? Oh, I think it moved over to the Q&A. Hang on. Okay, here's a question. Is Docker Swarm swappable for Kubernetes? A question from Brandon. Dan, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Good question. It is not at this point. It's not that we won't do that in the future necessarily, but right now our focus is on Kubernetes. We believe that that is the best scheduler out there.
Okay, thank you. Another question, in the performance stage, can you simulate, in the performance stage you simulate, is that a stress performance test? So tell us more about what's happening when we show the performance test, Dan, as far as the browser performance tested.
Sure. So the browser performance test is bringing up a test client and hitting back on the server and measuring the response times. It does that consistently every time so that it has a baseline so that it can tell you whether or not performance has increased or decreased. I don't believe at this time that it is doing specifically stress performance testing, just performance testing.
Just response times generally. Okay. I have another question is, Luciano, I have a Python / Flask application running on AWS, Elastic Beanstalk. Is Auto DevOps compatible with this platform? Or should I change deploy to just AWS? And similarly, there's another question, Dan, that you might want to play that might be related to this was what languages and technologies are supported by Auto Build? And does it scan the subdirectories for build files? Do you want to maybe list off, or do you want to show that where we list the different languages that are supported?
Yes. Let's
because it's documented. I mean, if anyone has this is a question that's in our documentation under Auto DevOps and Auto Build, where we list that, and it's listed. And I see another question about, does Auto DevOps have auto rollback, and we'll get to that in a moment as well, because that'd be fun to talk about. So we'll get to that question in a minute.
So let's see, where is it in here? Your languages that are supported, we try and keep them all on par, but there are some areas where, for example, the build, actually, I know it's in the build pack section. There we go. I know if there's somewhere put me on the spot. There it is. So currently supported languages. You should, are you guys seeing this on the screen there? So these are the build packs that we're currently supporting the languages for the Heroku build packs. And then there are different languages, although again, it's a subset of this, and we're continuing to build it out for what SAST and the other security scans are supporting. But this is the base set right now.
So Dan, what's your
other languages you'd like that aren't here? We'd love to hear from you about that.
Awesome. Thank
and then
you.
I think there was I'm not sure that didn't answer the question about AWS. So we are using GKE right now, but GitLab can absolutely connect to AWS, and we do have the AWS's Kubernetes offering. And we do actually have a blog post out that talks about how to do that. And so with that, you should be able to use it, because it's just another Kubernetes cluster. And so you can actually, in the Kubernetes settings, which I didn't go into, but you can actually define your own local Kubernetes setup as well, if you'd like.
Dan, while you're on that, there's a question that's about how do you set up Kubernetes? What information do we need to integrate with GitLab? If you maybe want to show that and talk to that for a minute or two, there's a question.
Happen to be here, absolutely. So
that's right.
Under the Kubernetes cluster configuration, I can pick to add an existing Kubernetes cluster, one that I have set up myself, for example. We also have this tight integration right now with Google Kubernetes Engine. And for that, you log in. You have to make sure your login has access to Kubernetes. Ignore all of my accounts there. And then this is the setup for it. So it's really pretty simple. You give it a name. Oops. Just trying to be funny. It will go look at your account and figure out what projects you have available. You pick one. You pick the zone that you want to be in. Let's say West. The number of nodes you want to start with. And we've found, from at least a demo perspective and playing around perspective, one node is plenty to be able to spin up a whole bunch of review apps and interact with it. You can pick a different machine type. We've been using the standard pretty happily. And then create the Kubernetes cluster. I won't do that right now, but once you do, you'll see it basically spin up. This is the one that we've been on right here. And then you can use it.
Cool, thank you. There's a question, I want to get to this before we lose it. Could you go and show the epochs and the timescale while we're here? Somebody asked to see that as a quick demo to show how that works.
Sure. Let's see. I think that will play out best if we do that. If we do that from a different project. So let's actually look at GitLab.com or .org. So here's our epics. And in the roadmap view, you can see a lot of stuff that we're working on. This is all live, real data. And I can zoom into weeks. And I can zoom out to quarters.
Cool.
Search. and zero in on what I'm focusing on, for example.
Thank you. That's good. I had a question that's here, and I'm looking for it. Okay, here it is. And it's relevant. It's relevant to what I did this week. So I love that Erica asked us for where we were. I'm in London for the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and we had there was a presenter on the main stage, Chris Hill from Jaguar Land Rover, who talked about how he uses GitLab to deploy for the infotainment in the new Jaguar vehicles, how he's being able to, how he's building and deploying and shipping code to cars. And so Jose asked a question, does DevOps and GitLab support embedded development? And I think Chris would suggest yes, and I was looking for the video. The video of his presentation is not online yet, but when it is, we'll publish that because it's a fantastic talk about how that worked. But Dan, do you want to talk about cross compilers and VMs, which Jose is asking about, from how we could support that, or how that would be done?
Not terribly. I don't know if Lee might be a better person to address that if he's on.
Okay.
Sure.
What is the question specifically?
Yeah.
Does DevOps and GitLab support embedded development, the use of cross compilers and VMs?
Yeah, so this is Lee here from GitLab Support Engineering Manager. The answer there would be depending on what you need to develop those environments. So our CI runs using a runner. The runner is based on Go code, and it's designed to be run on Windows, Linux, or Mac. So if you can run your environment to actually compile and run the VMs in those environments, then you should be fine. But if you're doing more exotic embedded development that isn't run on those environments, then we currently don't have a runner that supports that. You could potentially try and experiment with it, but it's something that's not supported explicitly at the moment. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you, Lee. That was awesome. Michael asked, so what do you use for licensing information? Your own database or third-party source, like Black Duck? Assume that you're reporting licensing for all transitive dependencies.
Yes, so it's an open source package called License Finder, and we do use a public and maintained licensing directory. I don't remember exactly which one, or source of information. I don't remember exactly which. So.
And that would be in I think that will be in the documentation too as to what that is.
That is in the documentation, yeah.
So we talked about embedded development and the use of cross compilers. Let's talk about auto rollback. Dan, Saeed asked, does DevOps have auto rollback? And you want to talk about what we're doing there?
Absolutely. So I'll show you as well. So of course, since we're deploying and building and doing the whole thing, we're keeping track of everything that goes into the environment. If I look at the environment itself, here's our production one, then it has, there's not a whole lot of history here because this is a new setup, but this is the last thing that we deployed. We have all the information down to the commit and everything else, and I can, in this case, redeploy it. I can't roll back right now because there's nothing that I've done other than this. So let me actually look at the other setup we had. I think I've deployed a couple times. No, I haven't. So what you would see is a list of multiple environments, multiple deployments. And the first one is redeploy, but the rest of them are rollback. And so it's as simple as pressing, figuring out how far back you want to go. You can look at the commit and get the information about what exactly, which piece of change you're rolling back to, and then click the rollback button.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I think we're the potential for auto, and we've put auto in front of a number of other things. Just think we might look at that in the future too. I mean, I think that's actually in a future release or a future issue. That topic is, if we look at our
yes, it is.
So we're looking at how do we make that another addition to Auto DevOps.
Right. So based on sorry, yes, based on thresholds and from the monitoring and the output, both the potential for auto rollback of the environment and auto revert of the changes that were put into master or into your branch, main branch.
Yeah, what we're going to have to work on in that, and was how do we make that so it makes sense, and so that way people are either in control or they know what's happening and how it's going to work. Last question that I see. Oh, I think there's another one. Another one just came in, or did it get answered electronically? I did see a question about whether this is all included, all part of the community edition at core, or where this falls out. And the easiest way to answer that is to look at our launch post, which announced the release of 11.0, where we detail out where specific features and capabilities are released and licensed. So for example, license management is something that's listed out at, I think that was at Ultimate. Yeah, that was an Ultimate feature that we included. So it depends on where the feature aligns with the tier and the model. So that's the best place to look to check to answer that question. And we've answered that question. Let's see, are there other questions? I'm watching the chat, I'm watching the Q&A.
I think we're good on the Q&A section, but we may have one or two in the chat section. I know Sai Harsha had a question about Kubernetes and what information they need to integrate with GitLab in order to do so.
Sure, Erica. I'll jump in. Lee here again, Support Engineering Manager. I'll talk a little bit about Kubernetes. So there's a couple of different ways to deploy using Kubernetes, and it's up to your org and your org's needs. We suggest, and I hesitate to use the word recommend, but we ourselves like Google Cloud Platform. We think that's one of the easiest ways to get started using Kubernetes. So you're going to want to get familiar with using those tools. And then we have a couple of different ways to deploy GitLab using Kubernetes, which we have documentation on. That's something, if you're interested in, you can talk to our sales team and they can help you understand what your needs are and the best way to deploy GitLab for your org, what your vision is.
Thank you, Lee. I think, oh, okay. Dan, is that a question or a statement about Heroku build packs scan subdirectories?
No, it's nothing. Sorry about that.
It was a question earlier.
So there's a question in there about that, yes.
Yeah, it was a question. You want to talk about whether the scan includes the subdirectories?
Honestly, I'm not positive. I think that, I don't know if Lee, if you know, or if it's something we need to get back to you on.
I don't know off the top of my head. So that's something that unfortunately I don't have an answer to. Sorry.
All right, so let's go ahead. We can take that offline. We'll look into that. Fantastic. Other questions in the Q&A, in the question manager, or in the chat? All right. We love your questions. We love being able to answer your questions and help. So if we don't answer them here, we're super available and happy to answer your questions. You can reach us in so many different ways. Let's just go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll proceed ahead. And we'll talk about, and we'll close out the webinar. If you want to throw any other questions in, we'll try to jump to it. So the next slide really is 11.1. It's a tease, right? Next month, on the 22nd of the month, we will launch 11.1. And we're going to be doing more work. One of the highlights will be around license management. And you can look forward to improvements and more capabilities in license management, specifically, whitelisting, blacklisting, and being able to do more work to manage the to track and manage and to have controls over how license management works. So stay tuned, and we're excited to continue to ship and continue to innovate. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And we're super excited. We're excited for being our opportunity to be able to work with you and to share with you. And we'd like to invite you, if you haven't already, to sign up for a free trial of GitLab Enterprise Edition. We hope you're able to see what your team can do with it. And we'll put a link in there to how you can sign up for a free trial. And if you do have any other questions, any at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on our sales contact page at aboutgitlab.com/sales. And on behalf of Erica, Dan, and Lee, thank you so much for joining us and your input and your feedback. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.